My son and his wife made me sit in the garage during Christmas dinner, said the dining table was already full. I smiled, ate in silence beside the laundry machine, then quietly left after dessert. Before I share my full story, let me know where you're watching from and make sure to like the video to support me. I sat in my living room, staring at the Christmas tree. It was covered in lights and ornaments, just like every year. I had spent hours making it look perfect. But this year, something felt different. My heart felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. When I arrived at my son John's house for Christmas dinner, I was excited. I had baked my famous apple pie, and the smell filled the car as I drove. I hoped the evening would be full of laughter and joy, just like the old days when my husband was still here with us. The house was buzzing with activity. I could hear my grandchildren laughing and running around. The kitchen was warm, and the smell of roasted turkey filled the air. I smiled, taking it all in, feeling grateful to be with family. Dinner was about to start, and I walked into the dining room, expecting to find a seat at the table. But to my surprise, every chair was taken. John was setting the last plate and looked up. "Oh, Mom," he said, almost as an afterthought. "We ran out of space. We set a place for you in the garage." I stood there, stunned. A seat in the garage? I couldn't believe it. The garage was cold, filled with boxes and the old laundry machine. It was not where I thought I would spend Christmas dinner. I nodded, not wanting to cause a scene. I took my plate and walked slowly to the garage. The sound of the family laughing faded as I closed the door behind me. I sat down on a folding chair, the cold metal biting through my dress. The garage was dimly lit. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of a leaky pipe. It was a far cry from the warmth and light of the dining room. I placed my plate on an old workbench, next to a pile of tools. As I ate, I could hear the clinking of glasses and the chatter from the dining room. They were sharing stories, probably ones I had heard many times before. But this time, I was not part of it. I was on the outside, looking in. I thought about all the Christmases I had hosted, the meals I had cooked, the gifts I had wrapped. I had always put my family first, making sure everyone was happy and cared for. Yet here I was, alone in a garage, eating beside a laundry machine. The realization hit me, I was not a part of their celebration. I was just an extra, someone to be seated away when there was no room. My heart ached with a mix of sadness and anger. I had given so much, and yet, I felt forgotten. After dessert, I quietly gathered my things and slipped out the door. No one noticed. As I drove home, the streets were empty, lined with twinkling lights. Each light seemed to mock me, reminding me of the joy I had hoped to find tonight but didn't. When I got home, I set the pie dish on the counter. I looked around my house, once filled with laughter and love. Now, it felt empty, just like the garage where I had sat. I realized that night that things needed to change. I couldn't keep living like this, giving everything and receiving nothing in return. The thought scared me, but it also sparked something inside me, a desire to find where I truly belonged. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind was filled with questions. How had things gotten this way? Why hadn't I noticed before? My heart felt heavy with these thoughts, but underneath, a small flicker of hope began to grow. I knew I had to do something, but what? That was a question for another day. For now, I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the evening over and over. I knew I had to be strong and find a new path for myself, one where I wasn't just an afterthought. I lay awake that night, thinking about all the years I had spent taking care of my family. Memories flooded my mind, taking me back to when my husband was still alive. We raised John with love and care. We taught him to be kind and responsible. After my husband passed, I made sure to keep those values alive in our family. I remembered the holidays I hosted at our old house. The table was always full, not just with food, but with laughter and stories. I cooked for days to make sure everyone's favorite dish was there. The kids would play in the living room, and the grown-ups would sit and chat, sharing memories and dreams. When John got married, I was so proud. His wife, Lisa, was a sweet girl. I welcomed her into our family with open arms. When they had their first child, I was overjoyed. I helped them out whenever they needed it. I babysat my grandchildren, made meals, and even helped with bills when money was tight. I never thought twice about it. It was what family did. But sitting in that garage, I realized how much had changed. Over the years, my sacrifices grew, but the appreciation did not. I paid for repairs on their house, helped with school fees, and even covered unexpected expenses. Each time, I thought it was just what family did. I didn't mind because I loved them. I wanted them to succeed. I thought about the countless times I drove across town to help with emergencies, big and small. I was there when their car broke down, when the kids were sick, when Lisa needed a break. I was always there, steady and reliable. I never asked for anything in return. I just wanted to see them happy. But as I sat alone that Christmas, it hit me that my efforts had gone unnoticed. They were so used to my help that they didn't see it as special anymore. It was just expected. I had become invisible in my own family. The realization was painful. I felt a deep sadness, a heavy weight on my heart. I thought back to the Christmases of the past, how different they were. Back then, my husband and I were at the center of the celebration. We were the ones who started the traditions. We were the ones who made sure everyone felt loved and included. Now, I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own family's life. In the quiet of my room, I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't keep giving and giving, only to be pushed aside. It wasn't just about the garage. It was about all the times I had been overlooked, all the times my love had been taken for granted. I realized that I had been waiting for them to see me, to appreciate me. But maybe I needed to see myself first. Maybe I needed to understand my own worth. I had defined myself through them for so long, I had forgotten who I was outside of being a mother and a grandmother. That night, I promised myself that I would change things. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I had to take a step forward. I had to find a way to live for myself, to find happiness on my own terms. I had to show them, and myself, that I mattered. With that thought, I finally drifted off to sleep. My dreams were filled with memories of laughter and love. But underneath, a new dream was forming, a dream of a life where I was seen, where I was valued, where I was more than just a name on a family tree. The morning after Christmas, I woke up with a sense of purpose. The events of the night before had left a mark, but they also ignited a spark within me. I knew I had to take action, to reclaim my life and my dignity. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, thinking about what mattered to me. The family cabin came to mind. It was a place filled with memories. My husband and I had bought it years ago, hoping it would be a retreat for our family. Summers were spent there, with long days by the lake and nights by the fire. It was a place of peace and joy, a place where we all came together. But over time, the cabin had become just another obligation. I maintained it, paid for repairs, and made sure it was ready for each summer. Yet, as the years went by, John and his family visited less. It became clear that the cabin meant more to me than it did to them. I decided it was time to let it go. But not just sell it. I wanted it to mean something, to have a purpose beyond being a forgotten getaway. I thought about people who needed a place, a real refuge. That's when the idea came to me. I would donate the cabin to a shelter. The thought filled me with a sense of peace. The cabin could be a place where people found safety, warmth, and care. It could become a sanctuary for those in need, a place of healing and hope. I wanted to create a legacy of kindness, something that would last. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I explained my plan, my voice steady and sure. He listened, and I could hear the respect in his voice. He understood my decision, and he promised to help me make it happen. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was doing something meaningful, something for myself and for others. I was taking control of my life, making choices that reflected my values. It felt empowering. I knew John would be upset. The cabin was part of our family's history, but I also knew it had become a burden. I hoped that one day he would understand why I made this choice. It wasn't to hurt him, but to honor what the cabin had meant to us and to give it a new purpose. I spent the rest of the day sorting through old photos and letters, reminiscing about the good times we had at the cabin. Each picture told a story, each letter was a reminder of love and laughter. But as I looked through them, I realized that the memories would always be with me, no matter what happened to the cabin. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun set behind the trees. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, a beautiful reminder of the world's endless possibilities. I felt a sense of calm, knowing that I was on the right path. I thought about the people who would one day find solace at the cabin, people who needed a fresh start, just like I did. It gave me hope to know that the cabin would continue to bring joy and comfort to others. As I closed my eyes that night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had taken the first step towards a new beginning, a step that was long overdue. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them with courage and determination. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Free to make my own choices, free to find my own happiness. I was no longer just a background character in my own life. I was the author of my own story, and I was ready to write the next chapter. The days passed quietly after I decided to donate the cabin. I felt at peace with my decision, even though I knew it would cause a stir. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout to begin. One morning, I received a call from John. His voice was tense, not the usual calm I had known all his life. He had received a legal notice about the cabin. I could hear the disbelief in his voice. He asked why I hadn't consulted him, why I had done something so drastic. I listened, knowing this conversation was inevitable. I told him I wanted the cabin to serve a greater purpose. It was time for it to help those in need. I explained how it could provide shelter and hope, just like it once did for our family. I spoke with a calm I didn't know I had, laying out my reasons clearly. John couldn't believe it. He accused me of overreacting, of tearing the family apart. His words were sharp, meant to sting. But I held firm. I told him this was about more than a cabin. It was about being seen, about making choices that reflected my values. The conversation was hard. I could hear the anger and hurt in his voice. But I also heard something else, a hint of confusion, maybe even fear. This was new territory for both of us. I was no longer the silent, ever-giving mother he had always known. I knew John saw my decision as a betrayal. He felt I was punishing the family. But I tried to make him understand that it wasn't about punishment. It was about respect, about valuing myself enough to make a change. He didn't take it well. It ended with him saying things I never thought I'd hear from my son. He called me reckless and said I was damaging everything we built. But I stood my ground. I had to. I had to show him that I was serious, that my feelings mattered. After we hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was sad that it had come to this. But another part of me felt relieved. I had spoken my truth, and that was important. It marked a turning point for me, a moment where I chose myself, even if it meant facing anger and misunderstanding. The days that followed were quiet. I didn't hear from John again, and I knew he needed time to process. I hoped he would come to see things differently, but I also knew that might take a while. I had to be patient. I spent my time focusing on the shelter. I visited the site, met with the people who would benefit from my decision. They were kind and grateful, and their stories touched my heart. It reinforced my belief that I had made the right choice. Seeing their smiles and hearing their gratitude reminded me that the cabin would have a new life. It would continue to be a place of refuge, just as I intended. I found comfort in knowing that it would help others find peace and happiness. Despite the tension with John, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was starting to see the world through new eyes. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was Rose, a woman with her own dreams and desires. I was learning to embrace that. The confrontation with John was difficult, but it also marked the start of my journey towards self-discovery. I was beginning to break free from the expectations that had defined me for so long. I was ready to explore who I was outside of my family roles. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. I was learning to navigate this uncharted territory, to find strength in my decisions. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I was building a new life, one based on respect and self-worth. And so, I continued forward, hopeful and determined. I knew that the road ahead would be bumpy, but I was ready to face it. I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that I was finally living for myself. After my talk with John, things changed in the family. The cabin decision had created a rift. John and Lisa were upset, and it showed. The loss of the cabin hit them hard. It was more than a place, it was a symbol of our family's past. Now, it was gone from their lives, and they struggled to accept it. John didn't call for days. Lisa didn't reach out either. I understood their feelings but didn't regret my decision. I knew why I had done it, and I stood by it. It was time for me to start living for myself and helping others in a new way. The tension spread to other family members. My sister called, confused and worried. She had heard about the cabin and didn't understand why I had done it. I explained my reasons to her, hoping she would see my side. She listened but didn't say much. I could tell she was torn, caught between wanting to support me and wanting to keep the peace within the family. Even my grandchildren felt the change. They heard the whispers and noticed the tension during family gatherings. I could see the confusion in their eyes when they visited. They didn't understand why Grandma had made such a big decision without telling them first. I tried to talk to them, to explain that sometimes we must make hard choices for our happiness. But they were young, and it was hard for them to see the bigger picture. I hoped that one day they would understand. It was all I could do. Despite the strain, I felt a sense of relief. I was no longer carrying the weight of expectations that were not mine. I was free to make choices that felt right for me. It was a new feeling, and I embraced it, even as I faced criticism and isolation. Some family members reached out, wanting to know why I had acted so suddenly. They said I had always been the glue that held everyone together. I realized that while I had been that glue, I had also been invisible, my needs overlooked. I was navigating a new landscape, one where I was no longer the silent supporter. It was strange, even uncomfortable, to be at the center of family drama. But I knew it was necessary to move forward, to redefine my place in the family. As time went on, the initial shock began to fade. John and Lisa still struggled, but I hoped they would find a way to come to terms with the change. I wanted them to be happy, even if it meant they had to adjust to a new reality. I found solace in the shelter work. I spent more time there, helping where I could. The people valued my contributions and made me feel welcome. It was a stark contrast to the coldness at home. I was appreciated, and it gave me a sense of belonging. The shelter became my new family. I formed friendships and found a new purpose. It was rewarding to see the impact of my decision, to know that I was making a difference. It filled the void that had been left by the family tensions. I realized that I had been holding on to an image of family that no longer existed. In letting go of the cabin, I had also let go of the past. It was liberating, and it allowed me to focus on the present and future. Despite the challenges, I felt lighter. I was no longer burdened by the expectations of others. I had learned to say no, to prioritize my needs. It was a powerful lesson, one that I wished I had learned sooner. The journey was far from over. I knew there would be more difficult conversations and moments of doubt. But I was ready to face them, with the strength I had found in myself and the support of my new community. I was rebuilding my life, and it felt good. I was in control, making choices that reflected who I truly was. I was no longer afraid of the fallout. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I started spending more time at the shelter, and it quickly became a big part of my life. The people there were warm and welcoming. They appreciated my help, and I felt valued. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. The shelter was always busy. There were people of all ages, each with their own story. Some were there for a short time, others longer. They came seeking comfort, a fresh start, or just a place where they felt safe. I understood that need more than ever. I volunteered in the kitchen, preparing meals and serving them. The work was simple but fulfilling. I chatted with the other volunteers and listened to the guests' stories. Each story was unique, yet they all shared a common thread of hope and resilience. As I got to know the people, I felt a connection growing. They welcomed me into their world, and I found a sense of belonging. The shelter was more than just a place, it was a community, a new family. I realized I was not just giving my time, but also receiving something valuable in return. I met a woman named Linda, who managed the shelter. She was kind and patient, always ready to help those in need. We became friends, sharing laughs and stories during breaks. She introduced me to new activities at the shelter, and I slowly stepped out of my comfort zone. One day, Linda asked if I would help organize a community event. It was a simple gathering, with food, games, and music. I was hesitant at first, unsure if I could handle it. But Linda believed in me, and her confidence was contagious. I agreed, feeling nervous but excited. Planning the event brought me closer to the people at the shelter. We worked together, brainstorming ideas and making arrangements. It was hard work, but I enjoyed every moment. I felt alive, part of something bigger than myself. On the day of the event, the shelter was filled with laughter and music. Families played games, children ran around, and everyone shared a meal. I watched from the side, my heart swelling with pride and joy. This was what I had hoped the cabin would become, a place where people found joy and connection. Linda came over and gave me a hug. She thanked me for my help, and I felt a warmth spread through me. This was where I belonged. I was part of a community that saw me, appreciated me, and valued my contributions. As the day ended, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the quiet, invisible figure in the background. I was an active participant in a community that cherished me. I was finding my voice, my strength, and my purpose. The shelter had given me a new perspective. I learned that family wasn't just about blood ties or shared history. It was about connection, support, and love. I had found a new family, one that accepted me as I was, flaws and all. I still thought about John and the rest of my family. I hoped that one day they would understand my decision and see the changes in me. But I also knew that I couldn't wait for their approval. I had to keep moving forward, building the life I wanted. The shelter was a big part of that life. It was a place where I could be myself, without fear or judgment. It was a place where I could give and receive love. I was grateful for the opportunity to be part of it. I went home that night feeling content. I was no longer searching for something I couldn't find. I had found it here, in the laughter and kindness of new friends. I had found it within myself. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, I settled into my new life. My days at the shelter filled me with purpose. I was learning to live for myself, and it felt good. The people there had become like family, and I cherished the bonds we shared. I often spent quiet evenings reflecting on my journey. I thought about the changes I had made and the lessons I had learned. I had stepped away from a life where I felt invisible. Now, I was part of something real, where my presence mattered. One night, I sat down to write a letter to John. My heart was full of things I needed to say. I wanted him to understand my decision, to know that it came from a place of love. I hoped that one day, he would see that. In the letter, I expressed my hopes for him and his family. I told him how proud I was of the man he had become, despite the misunderstandings. I explained that my choice to donate the cabin was not to hurt him but to find peace and purpose for myself. I shared my experiences at the shelter, the joy it brought me, and the new family I had found. I wanted him to know that I was happy, that I was living a life that felt true to me. I was no longer bound by the expectations of others. I also made it clear that while I loved him, I could not return to the way things were. I needed to continue on my path, to explore this new chapter of my life. I hoped he would respect that and find it in his heart to understand. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a sense of closure. Writing the letter was cathartic, a release of emotions that needed to be expressed. I had said my piece, and now it was up to John to decide what to do with it. I mailed the letter the next day, not knowing how it would be received. But that was okay. I had done what I needed to do. I had reached out, extended an olive branch, and now the rest was in his hands. With the letter sent, I focused on the present. The shelter continued to thrive, and I was an integral part of its growth. I joined a few more activities, including teaching a small art class. It was something I had always wanted to do, and now I had the chance. Through these classes, I discovered a new passion. Art became a way for me to express myself, to connect with others on a deeper level. The joy on the faces of those I taught was a reward in itself. I was making a difference, and it felt incredible. The shelter had become my safe haven, a place where I could explore my interests and grow. I was no longer just Rose, the mother, or the grandmother. I was Rose, the artist, the teacher, the friend. It was a new identity, one I was proud to embrace. I still thought about my family, hoping they would come around. But I no longer waited for their approval. I was living for myself, and that was enough. I had learned that my happiness did not depend on others. It came from within. Each day was a new beginning, filled with possibilities. I was open to whatever came my way, ready to face the future with courage and grace. I was at peace with my decisions and excited about what lay ahead. I had found a new sense of freedom, one that came from knowing who I was and what I wanted. I was no longer defined by the roles I played in others' lives. I was creating my own story, one filled with love, purpose, and fulfillment. As I looked to the future, I felt hopeful. I knew there would be challenges, but I was ready to face them. I had found my voice, my strength, and my place in the world. I was living my truth, and for the first time, that was more than enough.